And for those who enjoy this channel and would love to support us financially, please feel free to hit that donate link. We'd greatly appreciate it. God bless.
We're live.
Okay, looks like we're live, guys. We're here tonight on Standing for Truth for another really exciting debate. We've got NephilimFree and David, who goes by Kakarot on YouTube. This is not their first rodeo. David, he's had a few debates. I just debated him last week. He's debated Kent Hovind, and he even had a debate earlier today. So this is going to be good. Two very knowledgeable individuals. Brother Ness been at this for a while. He's had a ton of debates. So this is going to be a good, engaging one. I should say we will have, it's kind of going to be a little bit formal, informal, brief, 10-minute openings. Whatever's not used in the openings, we'll toss into the discussion portion, and we'll have a quick Q&A afterwards as well. So tag either myself or Praise. We will save those questions and make sure we get to them at the end of the debate. Quick announcement: tomorrow at 9 EST, we've got Salvador debating Ron Garrett. It's going to be a really good debate. We're looking forward to that one as well. They're going to be discussing genetic entropy. So Ron, he's I'm not sure if he's an atheist. I know he's an evolutionist. He's written some criticisms against Dr. John Sanford and his work on genetic entropy. So, and Sal works for Dr. Sanford. So be sure to check that one out. It's going to be a fun weekend. So enough from me. Let's hand it over. Before we get into some openings, I'm going to hand it over to David, and then we'll hand it over to Nep just to give a brief introduction if they want to kind of plug their channel, tell us what they're doing, tell us how they're doing. But yeah, gentlemen, thanks for joining us. David, I'll throw it over to you.
All right, thanks so much. Yeah, thanks again for having me. It was really awesome talking with you last week. It's awesome to be here to talk with Neff. So yeah, and earlier I just had a debate or a discussion, debate or whatever you want to call it, with Dr. Don McElroy, I believe. And even though I myself didn't talk that much, it was a lot of fun talking with him. So I don't have any professional science degrees or any science background. This is just kind of like a hobby of mine. I find this thing kind of interesting. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you. We appreciate your respectful approach and willingness to discuss these issues. I think they're very important. So let's hand it over to Neff. I mean, he's no stranger to this channel. So Neff, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm doing all right. I just had Sal Giardina, a geologist and former geology advisor for the state of Arizona, as a guest on my channel, talking about erosion rates and uniformitarianism. You might want to give that a watch. It's about a 30-minute a little discussion with him. And that's pretty much what I've been doing lately. It's just nothing new but that. Really looking forward to having this debate with David.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Neff. And we got Praise here, our phenomenal producer. Praise, once again, thanks for always giving us your time and working hard for the cause. So we appreciate that, Praise. Like I said, Praise will be helping out with the questions in the audience as well. So either tag myself or Praise. This is going to be a good one. So you know what? My mistake. I forgot to ask who wants to go first. Any specific preference?
No.
Doesn't matter to me.
Okay. Shall we start with David? You wanna kick it off for us?
Sure. So yeah, absolutely. So a lot of this stuff I actually covered in my debate with Hovind, specifically the fossils, but there are some that I didn't get to address in there. You'll see. But there's also some things about radiometric dating and genetics and other such things that you'll get to see. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Of course, yeah. Anytime either of you gentlemen want to share your screen throughout the discussion, let us know, and Praise will make sure that's yeah. So if you want to share away.
All right, sweet. Thanks. Here we go. Share audio. All right. Can you see my screen?
I think it takes
all right.
a few seconds
You
for
see?
it to start sharing.
Yeah, it might just take a few seconds. So as long as the fourth button, share screen, I think it requires you to actually click the square in the middle and then share screen again. Praise from your end, brother. Does it look like it's coming through okay?
Not yet. It's not yet. It's not sharing anything.
That's weird. Yeah.
It is a little
like,
bit
there's
buggy. These
thing
things.
at the bottom of my screen says StreamYard.
I think Praise
StreamYard can be a little buggy about
I think
this.
Praise might have to do it from his end. And don't worry, I paused the timer, so you're not gonna run out real quick. Just 1 second. I'll make sure that Praise. I think he has to click a button to ultimately share it. So we'll get her going just a second.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, guys.
No worries. It's not your fault.
No, it's not your fault. It's just the way things work in these StreamYard hangouts. I think maybe Praise went to get a cup of coffee or feed his cat or something.
You may have fallen asleep on it. Wouldn't be the first time. Once he gets back, we'll make sure that he gets the screen shared real quick. I'll send him a message.
Awesome.
Maybe
he forgot he needs to be present during this thing.
And just when I was giving him those compliments, I might have to take those back. Maybe it's a good time. Yeah, last what was it? Last debate we had, me and David. No, I think everything went well then. So I just sent him a message. But if you wanted to briefly go over your presentation,
okay, yeah, I'll just talk about it.
Yeah. And the second he gets back, boom, we'll make sure that we get it shared for you.
Awesome, sweet. All right. So just to get started, I think one of the first things that compels me to accept evolution is genetics. Life is built on DNA, and each gene in DNA codes for specific amino acids, which ultimately make up proteins. A protein such as cytochrome C, for example, it's found in many different types of organisms. And the number of different amino acids found between humans and other organisms decreases as the more closely related organism becomes. So, like, we only have one amino acid difference than rhesus monkeys in cytochrome C. We have 9 differences with rabbits, and then 10 with cows, then 12 with pigeons, and so on and so forth. The less, the farther apart you get. And this makes sense given evolution. It would make sense in this way. And another thing is that scientists, they also determine our relationships with other life forms by using the same techniques that they use in paternity tests to determine if I'm the mother or if I'm the father of a particular individual. So they use the exact same methods. And you guys know about Archaeopteryx and Microraptor and Sinornithosaurus, transition between, dinosaurs and birds. It had wings, and it had a long bony tail, as well as 3 fingers and no beak and teeth, which, no bird has those. But those are, dinosaur traits as far as what we think of as dinosaurs. So when looking at dinosaurs to birds, those are some good examples. And when looking from ape-like creatures to humans, or apes to humans, however you want to frame it, Lucy probably is the most famous individual. Dated at around 4 million to 3 million years old. It had, a femur, pelvis, and foramen magnum more like that of a modern human than it does like a modern chimpanzee. So it has a mosaic of very ape-like and human-like characteristics. And the same thing with Homo habilis, except that it is dated to around 2.4 to 1.4 million years ago. So it appeared later, but it also did coexist with the Australopithecines. That makes sense. And it had a larger brain than the Australopithecines and a smaller face. So it's becoming more human-like as as this thing comes about. And then Homo erectus, which appears after.
Hey, David, sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to. Praise, are you back?
Yep, I'm back. I'm sorry. I hit the old shower rooski.
Yeah, that's probably not a good idea in the middle of a debate. You kind of got to be present. But yeah, so David was just looking to share his screen for his opening. Mm-hmm. Typically, that's how they start with opening statements. So beautiful. Right. Okay, take your time, David. And
you can see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we can.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
And we're not going to rush you. So whatever time you need, we'll allow Neff to take equal time.
All right, sweet. Thanks so much, y'all. Okay, I'm just going to put it in full screen because it looks better that way. All right, yeah, so Homo erectus, that's the next one. This is probably one of the best transitions because, especially depending on the individual, some creationists will say that, Java Man, for example, is just an ape, and other creationists will say it's just a human. And Java Man, the skull is down here. It's clearly, human, not Homo sapiens, but clearly very human-like, large brain, but it also has a brow ridge, and their brains are smaller than that of ours. So, yeah. And when looking from fish to tetrapods, Tiktaalik was actually a transitional fossil that was discovered or was predicted and discovered by paleontologist Neil Shubin. It's got very fish-like characteristics such as, scales, fins. And it also had lungs and gills, but interestingly, the gills were present because of rod-like bones, which helped them pump water over their gills. And it's also reasonable to infer that they had lungs as the earliest fish in the fossil record that pre-existed Tiktaalik. Both had gills and lungs. And the lungs of those fish that would eventually go on to lead to tetrapods, the lungs of modern fish as what we think of as, yeah. And when looking at fossils, we don't find any trilobite, dinosaur, and human or mixed together. This makes sense given an evolutionary explanation because there's no evidence that these organisms ever coexisted, and these layers are dated to be different ages, and I'll explain that momentarily. This is how we determine ages of fossils. So there are isotopes in particular atoms. So, for example, C12 and C14. Some isotopes like carbon-14 are unstable and will change their number of protons and or neutrons and become something else. And the initial particle is called a parent isotope, while the stable one the decayed isotope, I guess, it's called the daughter isotope. I'm probably saying that wrong. But the rate of decay for isotopes does not change, and it's a constant. And we analyze the ratio of the parents to daughters to calculate how many half-lives have passed. Therefore, the fossil or the layer is. So, and carbon-14, of course, is only good up to around 50,000 years. So we don't use that to date anything like, dinosaur or trilobite fossils. So, yeah. And that is it.
Awesome. Thanks for that there, David. We appreciate your opening. We will hand it over to Neff. Neff, take your time. And like I said, whatever time is not used, we'll toss into the discussion. And to the audience, tag Praise or myself with any questions you may have, and we'll make sure we get to those. So, Neff, The floor is yours, brother.
Okay, so I'm trying to screen share. Let's see if we can get my screen share on there. Screen there.
I think praise went for another shot. Oh, okay, there we go.
There we go. Okay. All right. So evolution is an antiquated idea born in a time when man knew nothing about biology. It's a 19th century myth. Charles Darwin had this cockamamie idea that all the living things in the world were related by common ancestry in a time when science knew nothing about biology and nothing about very little about the fossil record, and it was basically a philosophy. So this is what evolutionists point to when they try to say there's actual evidence for evolution. They show variety in living things, like the color of a beetle or a moth can change in a population over time, and they'll claim, see, evolution in action. But that's not evolution. Doesn't change the structural design of the beetle one bit. Therefore, it doesn't move it towards becoming anything fundamentally different. Color, you could change the color of an organism a bajillion times. It's not going to ever make it any more something other than what it is. It doesn't help evolution theory at all. Same thing with crows. You can have different patterns reveal and their feathers. That doesn't move the organism towards becoming anything else. It's still a crow. Color isn't evidence of evolution. And the size of the beaks in the Galapagos finches, the same thing. It's variety. The creature already had a beak. It's still a finch. They reverted, by the way, to the smaller beaks because of the change in the environment decades later. The giraffe series. The giraffes got longer necks. Well, maybe so. Guess what? It's still a giraffe. Longer doesn't make it a move towards being a fundamentally different type of creature. And so evolutionists harp on this ridiculous idea that genetic mutation is a base mechanism for evolution. Well, that's absurd. We know what mutations do. They don't design anything. They destroy. What you're seeing on the screen is the most prominent examples of what mutations do to fruit flies in the laboratory. It makes them unable to survive outside the lab. Whenever the mutation causes an effect that's visible to the organism, it's always negative. So where's the evolution from mutation? Well, mutation has been studied for 90 years, and the evidence is in. It's a destroyer, not a designer. Evolutionists believed the idea of mutation to DNA early in the discovery, after the discovery of DNA. Oh, mutations to DNA must be the mechanism for evolution. But that idea has been refuted by 90 years of study. Mutations don't design anything. They destroy. So these are the common arguments from evolutionists. Similarities in genetics, but incongruencies in those alleged similarities between various families of life refute the idea that genetic similarities prove common ancestry. Comparative anatomy and homologous structures, but different genetic pathways have been discovered for some of these same features in different genus of life, and it refutes the idea of comparative anatomy. Had evolution been true, evolution would have retained the certain Hox genes, modified them over time to turn fins into legs, instead of starting from scratch to make entirely new Hox gene sets. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't support evolution. Mutations such as immunities, but immunity has no effect on anatomy, doesn't move a bacteria one iota towards becoming a fundamentally different type of organism. Therefore, mutations that cause immunities in bacteria is not evidence of evolution at all. Transitional forms. The fossil record doesn't show them. Every prominent evolutionist who's written a book on the subject of the rock record has admitted the fossils don't show any clear evidence of transition. So all life is defined by a four-dimensional package of information which is organized linguistically and operates algorithmically. This alone empirically verifies that all life was a product of intelligence. Information is a product of intelligence. Linguistics depends upon semiotics, that is the symbolic representation of something, which is produced only by intelligence. Algorithms are procedures which require forward thinking and choice making, which are products of intelligence. Therefore, it's verified empirically that all life is a product of intelligent design. Natural processes are not the cause for organic systems. So here's some statements. I'm not going to bother reading them to you unless you want me to. From scientists going from 1955 to 1983 to 1991 and to the present, where evolution scientists acknowledge that mutations due to organisms in the laboratory, especially fruit flies, show only destructive effects. They don't show any evidence for evolution. For example, Lynn Margulis, a famous evolutionist herself, said this: "I have seen no evidence whatsoever that these evolutionary changes can occur through the accumulation of gradual mutations." And Gordon Rattay Taylor said, "It is striking, but not much mentioned, fact that though geneticists have been breeding fruit flies for 60 years or more in the labs around the world, flies which produce new generations every 11 days, and have yet to see the emergence of a new species or even a new enzyme. In all these mutation experiments, nothing, no support for evolution." So this is a science paper in the secular mainstream journals. It's been discovered that DNA is linguistic. It has linguistic properties: semiotics, semantics, punctuation, syntax, acrobatics, and grammar. Here's one from Rutgers University: The Linguistics of DNA, Words, Sentences, Grammar, Phonetics, and Semantics. A recent study just last year from the Karolinska Institute in Sweden discovered that the grammar of human genetic information is more complex than that of any spoken language in the world. That's an important thing to remember. The grammar of genetics in human genome is more complex than any human spoken language. There are algorithms in DNA repair, in fact. Here's another scientific paper discussing algorithms. And this is an actual algorithm. Every cell in your body is performing this algorithm every single hour. That's an actual algorithm written up by a computer programmer to replicate the processes going on in the cell relating to DNA. It's an actual algorithm, and that's what's happening in your cells. Algorithms are products of intelligence. They are products of mind. They require forward thinking. They require decision making, choices. These are things that minds do. Molecules cannot do them. Therefore, every single organism in the world is empirically verified as a product of intelligence because its DNA is information, organized linguistically, which operates algorithmically. These are things only intelligence can produce. Every organism was designed. This is scientific, in fact. It's new discoveries. Charles Darwin couldn't possibly have known what was going to be discovered in genetics in 1870. He just didn't have a clue. They didn't know in 1930 either. They didn't really know in 1950. But since then, it's been discovered that DNA is a package of information which operates algorithmically and possesses grammar and linguistics properties more complex than spoken language. Why would somebody not understand that evolution is false and life is designed, since it's information, algorithms, and linguistics which define all species? Genetic similarities don't support the evolution idea. Evolutionists have been saying this is true for a long time, but even prominent evolutionists admit that genetic similarities have major problems for evolution. For example, Linda Wolcott said, "The molecular taxonomists who have been drawing up evolutionary histories for nearly every kind of life are going to have to undo all of their years of junk DNA-based historical reconstructions and wait for the full implications to emerge before they try again." Carl Woese, the discoverer of the third domain of life, said, "No congruent organismal phylogeny has emerged from the many individual protein phylogenies so far produced, and phylogenetic incongruencies can be seen everywhere in the universal tree, from its roots to major branchings within and amongst the various taxa that make up the primary groupings themselves." And also from this paper, incongruencies between phylogenetics derived from morphological versus molecular analysis, and between trees and based on different subsets of molecular sequences, listen to these words now, has become pervasive as data sets have expanded rapidly in both character and species. In other words, the more they discover about genetics, the more incongruencies with the idea of phylogenetics are discovered. So the idea comes forth from the evolutionists that they find genetic similarities between creatures they believe are related, and then they discover crazy things that contradict it, and those are the things you don't hear about. So here's one of them. For example, the digits, the Hox genes that produce the digits in birds allegedly evolved from those that produce the the digits in the feet of lizards, right? If evolution were true, evolution should have preserved those Hox genes. But for some reason, the Hox genes that produce digits 1, 2, and 3 in birds don't produce 1, 2, and 3 in in reptiles. Don't produce the digits 1, 2, and 3 in reptiles. Birds, I'm sorry. Instead, they produce 2, 3, and 4. So the evolutionist says, well, they all jumped over 1. How does that even happen? How does that even happen? That can't happen. So this is a major incongruency in genetics. And I've got so much more I could share. All this information about evolutionary transitions and whatnot, and incongruencies in genetics and phylogenetics. Now, my opponent mentioned evolution of proteins. When it comes to similarity in the proteins between a human and a chimp, for example, a difference of 1 or even 3 or 5 amino acids is critical. Similarity when it comes to proteins is not good enough. Proteins are so specific, so incredibly specific, that a difference of 1 amino acid, when a mutation swaps out the wrong amino acid in a protein, the code, the result is a protein that has diminished efficiency or is completely functionless. That's how precise a protein is in its structural design. So a difference of 1 to 3 amino acids or more between the proteins of a human or a chimp is a world of difference because of the specificity of proteins. It is so different. It's like saying the number 994 is the same as 1000. Oh, no, it's not. The difference of 4 makes them completely different numbers. So there's so much that could be said. You mentioned Tiktaalik's lungs. The problem is...
You've got about a minute, Neph? About a minute, brother.
Okay. The fossil of Tiktaalik does not actually show lungs. They're assumed because of the shape of the rib cage of the creature that it had lungs. There's no actual fossil evidence of lungs. They weren't preserved. So there's no evidence that Tiktaalik had lungs. That's just assumed. That's an idea based from evolution, but it's not shown scientifically. Shouldn't be said then. You mentioned human evolution. All of the alleged ancestors of man fit very nicely within the variation for apes or for man, but the transition between them is unknown in the fossil record. There simply isn't anything. For example, all the features of Australopithecus afarensis are distinctly ape. And here's some scientific references for you. Nothing that shows they're human-esque or becoming human. Their features are purely ape. And I guess that's enough time for my opening.
Awesome. Just on time there, Neph. Neph, thanks for your opening. Thanks for your opening as well, David. I like the visuals. Clear, concise. So this is going to be fun. So we're jumping right into the discussion portion with the minutes that David didn't use. We got about a 50-minute discussion. Once again, I have gotten a couple questions from the audience, but just as a reminder, tag myself, tag praise, and we'll have a good Q&A. So whoever wants to kick it, I guess since Brother Neff just ended, David, if you got a question, why don't you kick off the discussion for us?
All right, cool. So the reason that Neff mentioned that we haven't really directly witnessed lungs in Tiktaalik, the reason that we can infer that is because from what I understand, we found lungs in earlier fish that appear in lower layers that are similar to Tiktaalik. So it's reasonable to infer that because it was Tiktaalik has been, found above, fish that had lungs. So
I think you're mistaken. I don't, not lungs. They found swim bladders, not lungs, in fish. Swim bladder is a different feature.
In fish found below Tiktaalik?
Not lungs, swim bladder. A swim bladder is an organ that the fish can use to store air or water to change its buoyancy, but it's not a lung.
Okay. Do you
no
have
fish has been found with lungs.
Do you have a citation for that?
No. But you know what a swim bladder is, don't you?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's what they found.
Okay. All right. So what about Australopithecus afarensis being very just being like a complete ape with no human-like features? What about their femur and their pelvis and their foramen magnum? Like those are more human-like than they are like a chimpanzee, for example.
Well, they fit beautifully into the variation we see in apes, just like humans fit very nicely in the variation we see for humans. The iliac blade of the pelvis of a afarensis flares out to the side. It has very little curvature to it, but human pelvis curves pronouncedly towards the front, and this gives a human being the ability to walk upright for a considerable period of time. The pelvis of afarensis would not allow the animal to be bipedal.
Why not? It looks more like ours than it does like a chimpanzee.
No, it really doesn't. I don't know where you get that idea, but it's because have you ever seen a chimpanzee walk? Well, sure. I've seen lots of photographs of them. I've seen lots of photographs. I can pull one up.
Right, and doesn't the chimpanzee out of modern human, an Australopithecine and a modern human, doesn't the chimpanzee seem like the odd one out as far as pelvises go?
Chimpanzee's pelvis is taller, much taller. So the real difference is that afarensis had a shorter pelvis. That doesn't mean it's human-esque.
Right.
The shape of it is very ape-like, though.
Chimpanzee-like.
Well, I mean, evolutionists look at things and they see a lot, but as I said, the pelvis. I mean, the pelvis clearly flares out to the side, not curves around to the front like a human pelvis.
Right.
And okay, so I think it's a leap. It's a leap to say that the pelvis is becoming human. It's not curved anywhere near enough
more human
forward to be. Well, I mean, Well, I mean, evolutionists are going to look at everything and say that's more like something else. That doesn't demonstrate that it has the features.
Between a chimpanzee and a human, it looks more like that of a human.
You're going to have a lot more curvature to the iliac blades of the pelvis to make the creature upright walking than what you see in the
also, their femurs, too. Their femurs are slanted like ours.
A human being's femurs don't slant when they stand straight up.
Well, yes, they do. Yeah,
No, actually, they don't. I'm going to stand up right now and put my feet directly under me. And guess what? My knees are directly up under my pelvis.
You can't see it like on your legs. I mean.
Okay, so the human's knees curve in at what, 1 degree maybe, and an ape is like 7, and you call that similarity? I don't see it.
I don't know exactly to what degree, but yes, human femurs do slant inwards.
By the tiniest bit, almost perfectly straight. Nothing like an ape, though. Look at a chimpanzee. The difference in a chimpanzee's, their knees, their femurs point in dramatically at a dramatic angle. With human being, they're nearly perfectly straight up and down. What are you I don't see this angle that you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. So the femurs of a chimpanzee are straight. They're not slanted. That's because that's one of the reasons why they're quadrupedal.
No. A chimpanzee's femurs angle inward from the pelvis toward the knee when they stand up. Remarkably, a human being's legs are perfectly vertical. There's a dramatic difference between them.
I'm skeptical of that.
Well, look at some photographs of a chimpanzee fossil and a human fossil standing upright.
All right. So here is a human and a gorilla femur compared to each other. If I can get a full screen. Okay. Okay. Sorry for taking so long. All right, I'm gonna share just so you can see. Can you see? Or do you just see my face? Or do you see...
It's coming.
Okay, cool. Oh, yeah, it's not gorilla. Yeah, it's a chimpanzee. My bad. Yeah, I accidentally said gorilla. Can you see? Okay, cool. Awesome. Can you see this drawing of, can you see these skeletons? Hello?
Yeah, I see it.
Can y'all hear
I'm sorry,
me?
I was muted. Yes, I see it.
Okay, all right, cool. Okay, cool. Awesome. Sorry, I just didn't hear. So as you can see, the femur of the chimpanzee is slanted more outwards. And as you can see, the human slanted more inwards. You can't really see it with the skin on because it kind of masks that or hides it. But yeah, Lucy's femur looked more like ours than it did this because it's slanted inward.
That's a bad illustration. It really is.
It is?
Yes.
Well, you can find it in other ones.
Let me screen share one, and you'll see what I'm saying.
Okay, cool.
Hold on.
Oh, here we go. Here's another one. Yeah. Sorry.
Oops, wrong thing. Okay, so let me try screen sharing this picture. A far better illustration. Actual.
There we go. Yeah, you can see the pelvis too. Looks more like ours. It's nowhere near as tall.
Here we go. On the right, you see a human being. There's afarensis, and there's a chimpanzee. Look at the human being.
Right.
The legs are almost completely vertical. When a
mean.
human being stands upright, their knees don't come to their legs don't angle inward by any noticeable degree, possibly 1 degree. Or it's very, very slight, very slight. So there is what you said about a human knees bending inward towards the center, like the apes, is not true. That's not true.
No, I didn't
legs
say
are
that.
nearly perfectly vertical.
Like chimpanzees, I didn't say that their femurs slanted inward. If I did say that, then I misspoke.
Well, let me put it like this to you: if that's the best evidence you got for evolution, you got to go back to.
No, it's not. It's not the best. It's just it's one of a few. I mean, given that their femurs are more like that of ours than they are a chimpanzee, and given that their foramen magnum was intermediate, I believe it was intermediate between us and chimpanzees, and also, what else? As far as the other proto-human or quasi-human ape creatures, whatever you want to call them, Homo erectus is another one. That's probably another, one of the best examples, especially how some creationists will say that Java Man, for example, is just an ape, and others will say it's just a human, which is a clear indication that, it's in transition, from very ape-like to...
I don't. I see that the creatures allegedly ancestral of man fit very nicely within the variety we know of extinct species of ape, and the fossils that we have of humans are completely human. I'm trying to screen share something.
Except that some creationists... Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I don't think anybody knows of this evidence. This is an idea I think you have. Let me share some of the features of Australopithecus afarensis that demonstrate it's purely an ape. It has a highly pronounced brow ridge,
No,
an
no, it's
elongated.
not just. It's not.
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
it's strictly ape. All these features are pure ape. Okay, it has a highly pronounced
Mm.
brow ridge, an elongated temporal bone, a pronounced muzzle.
Yeah.
It's chinless. It has an eye socket shape that is specifically ape. Its foramen magnum is not centered like a human being. It has a distinctly ape-shaped brain case. It has an adjuncted great toe, a distinctly ape ear canal, distinctly ape curved bones, toe bones. It has finger bones that are curved more like a chimpanzee. Human beings don't have curved finger bones. It has distinctly ape teeth. Ape teeth are wider than they are long. Human teeth are longer than they are wide. Just the opposite. That's distinctly ape feature. It has distinctly ape wrist bones, a distinctly ape shoulder blade. It has distinctly a boreal humerus, distinctly a boreal humerus attachment for the shoulder and back muscles, and its wrist bones lock together just like that of a chimpanzee when it walks. So there's nothing about afarensis that is human-like. It's strictly ape.
I wouldn't agree with that. I mean, given
the scientific studies that I cite in this,
there are some very human-like characteristics.
Well, what would you say to the scientists whom I'm citing here, who are all evolutionists, by the way, who make these points that the features of these various features of the creature are distinctly ape? Are all these scientists wrong? Because these are all secular scientists, not creationists, like Spoor and Phillips and Sussman.
Okay,
and Stern.
well, what did they say about the pelvis and the femur?
Well, you know what they say. They has a distinct. It has iliac blades that flare out to the side, not curve forward like a human being. You have to have that, or you're not going to be upright right walking very well.
Wait, which number is which number?
No, that's not in my list. It's not in the list here.
Well, do you have like a source of like a of scientists saying that they had just pure ape like pelvises and femurs and stuff like that?
Well, I could cite some names, but they'd be creationists, and you wouldn't agree with what they say. But the fact is that the iliac blade of the pelvis, it flares out to the side. It doesn't curve forward like a human's. That's fact, right?
I'm sorry?
But the simple fact is the iliac blades of the pelvis flare out to the side. They don't curve around forward like a human being. That's necessary for upright walking. If you don't have that, you're going to struggle to walk upright, and you won't be doing it real long. You're going to go back to all fours because your hips and your legs are going to become exasperated.
Based on what I've heard from anthropology, based on what I learned in anthropology class, they were at least a habitual biped, so they weren't necessarily fully bipedal like us. I could be wrong. Some
theory of evolution in that based on actual physical evidence. I mean, it has distinctly ape features.
It's a reasonable inference based on biomechanics and how bones go together. It's a reasonable inference, I would say.
I don't agree. I don't believe anybody has provided such evidence. I believe that's what they say. That's what they'll tell you, but nobody has demonstrated that. In fact, a creationist scientist developed a software application to simulate how afarensis would walk, and it would walk like a chimpanzee, stilted back and forth, side to side. So, based on the bones.
Okay. Does the entire scientific community embrace that?
Well, of course not. Do you think that they're going to accept creation as true when they're married to the evolution theory? They don't have. I don't need secular scientists to agree that creation is true to show that it is.
Well, there's not a conspiracy to
Well, of course there is.
I mean, why would there be some kind of conspiracy to filter out creationism?
Well, let me explain that conspiracy to you. If there isn't a conspiracy to agree with the secular community that evolution is true and to promote evolution as true, why is it?
Well, it's not just secular. I mean,
Let me finish my question. If they're not conspiring to promote evolution to keep their jobs then why is it that virtually every prominent evolutionist scientist who has written a book about the fossil record has admitted in that book, written for their peers, that the fossils don't show clear evidence of evolutionary transition? And yet they'll tell students in
So
the
you're talking
university,
about Stephen
or
Jay
when they
Gould?
talk to each other, they acknowledge evolution is true and that the fossils are evidence of evolution. But in the books they write about the subject, they admit the fossil record doesn't show clear
So,
evidence of transition.
so
Why is that? If
are
that's
you
not
are you talking about
conspiring,
Stephen Jay Gould and his?
if that's not
Right. Okay.
conspiring,
So you're talking
let
about
me finish my
just saying.
statement, please. I won't need much more. If that's not conspiring to
Okay.
support evolution despite the evidence, what is?
Okay. So you're talking about. Did you mention scientists saying that there's like that there aren't that many fossils or something like that?
No. I'll say it again. Virtually every prominent scientist who has written a book discussing the fossil record has admitted in that book that the fossils do not show clear evidence of evolutionary transition. Why would that be true if they're not conspiring to support evolution theory to keep their jobs?
I'm skeptical. If they say that, I would have to look at the particular context. Yeah, I'm very skeptical of that, and I could be wrong. You could be right, but I'm skeptical. So,
well, I mean, it's an awful lot of them. It doesn't make sense that if evolution is true, they would make all of them. So many of them would make such admissions. Let me screen share with you just enough to show you.
cool.
Maybe I can screen share.
Thank you.
Something. I'm trying to screen share something now. Let's see if it's working. No, it's not. Let me try again. Here we go. No, that's not it either. Well, we're encountering this bug, you see, in the software for these Hangouts. I'll try it one more time. Here we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is just a few. Dr. Colin Patterson, evolutionist, senior paleontologist at the British Museum of Natural History, houses 60 million fossils, says, if I knew of any evolutionary transitionals, fossil or living, I would have certainly included them in my book, Evolution. And
okay, when was that book written?
Oh, probably 30 years ago. Colin Patterson has also said, oh, here comes the argument. Oh, that's so old. So if I show you a quotation from 2010, are you going to say the same thing? Oh, that's so old?
No. 2010, no.
Okay, 2006, 1999. At what point are you going to say that the fossils, they didn't have enough millions of fossils and scientists hadn't studied them enough that they can change their mind? At what point? What are you going to gauge? How are you going to make that judgment?
But I mean, I can give you examples of transitional fossils. Like Homo erectus and Microraptor and Tiktaalik and did I already say Homo erectus? I mean, we already talked about that. Then Therapsid, mammal-like reptiles. I mean, there's a whole bunch of transitional fossils. I mean.
There's no such thing as a transitional fossil. No fossil shows clear evidence of evolutionary transition. There isn't any. There just isn't. Yeah, I'm absolutely sure. Yeah. And in fact, evolutionists, scientists make these admissions.
Some specimens of Homo erectus are just a full ape, and others will say it's just a full human.
But because I don't know, I can't speak for them, but there is no such thing as a transitional form. That I'm showing you on the screen dozens, and I could show you if I collected more, about 30 times this many statements by prominent evolutionists who admit the fossil record doesn't show clear evidence of evolutionary transition. So here's one from 1993. Did they not have millions of fossils? 1983, didn't they have already probably 500 million fossils studied and recovered from the earth by 1983, 1981, 1999. Here's one from 1999. This is from D.T.S. Kemp, curator of zoological collections at Oxford University. In virtually all cases, new taxa appear for the first time in the fossil record, with most distinctive features already present, practically no known stem group forms. In other words, just sparingly little that we could talk about and claim evolution is true. Here's another one from 1999. The more one studies paleontology, the more certain one becomes the evolutionist based on faith alone. That's Lewis
No,
T.
it's
Moore.
not based on faith. There's evidence to support it.
I have never heard of it. How could evolution be true when we know today that DNA is a four-dimensional package of information?
Well, DNA is used to
algorithmic. Let me finish my question. Let me finish my question.
DNA to determine
Let me finish my question before you talk over me. Okay.
Sure.
How can evolution be true when we know today that DNA is a four-dimensional package of information which operates linguistically and algorithmically? How is it possible for undirected, unintelligent chemistry to produce information linguistics or algorithms for every single kind of living thing in the world? Because evolution would have to do that for it to be true. Can you give us a plausible reason to believe that information linguistics and algorithms can arise from undirected, dumb molecules bumping around?
Well, so that's biochemistry. Yeah, that's very, very complicated. I should clarify, I'm not an atheist. So there certainly could have been, it's definitely not impossible that there was, a mind that, had this planned out or something like that. But it's I'm sorry?
Well, if the genome of every living thing is information which operates algorithmically and possesses semiotics, how is it plausible to believe that natural undirected evolution, which is a chemical process, is true, and all life is related by common ancestry because of chemical changes to DNA that are undirected? How is that plausible then?
Mutations are random, but they're selected for, they're filtered out if they're, not, if they're. How do mutations occur?
No, how do mutations create information linguistics and algorithms?
Create information? What do you mean by that?
Well, do you know what information is, right?
Well,
you know what an algorithm is?
Like a base pair? Like, would a base pair be information? Is that what you're asking?
It would stand for a single bit of information in a sequence of information, like a text character in a sentence, right? Maybe.
Gene duplications, right? Sometimes
gene duplications
duplicated during, I believe, mitosis.
How does gene duplications create information linguistics and algorithms?
I'm explaining. So let's say you have a gene, and let's say during cellular division or something like that, a gene is duplicated. So you have a copy of that, and that copy is inserted in the same strand of, or the same strand of DNA. So you're basically, your genome has increased in size. And what can happen next is that there can be a point mutation where, a nucleotide is changed. So that's new. And it's also different. So
how does that constitute information, create linguistics or algorithms? Because a gene can be duplicated.
Well, yeah, you take something that already exists and you copy it, and then you edit that copy, and that changes,
How does that create information linguistics or algorithms?
Well, it's added information.
How is it information?
It's because it increases the genome. It increases the base pair length. If you start out with
how does increasing the size of the DNA increase information? Because nobody,
What do you
I'm
mean
just
by information then?
nobody knows of any process of the creation of new information in DNA.
Well,
Can
what do you mean
somebody
by information,
share
though?
my
That's
screen,
what we need. We
please?
need to define what information
Well, what
is.
is information? Are you saying you need somebody to tell you what information is?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm asking you. I mean, what do you define by information? Like,
Information is knowledge conveyed from the
if
sender
I
to a
tell you that like
receiver.
a gene duplication occurs and that a mutation happens
Let me
to
show
that
you what gene
duplicated
duplication
gene,
does.
then that's new and it's also added. So
That doesn't constitute information because it's new and added. A bullet hole in a car doesn't constitute anything new and added to the car that's useful and functional. It's now known that genetic information is overlapping and nested. You could have a sequence of information going from the right to the left in the DNA, and it might code for numerous genes. And they may overlapping each other, found nested within each other. Base pairs are shared between numerous genes. The information in the DNA is highly compressed. Numerous science papers have published about it. This is not a creationist idea. Okay, so for example, there's one sequence of information in the DNA that produces 521 different proteins in a human being. From point A on the left to point B on the right, within that set series of base pairs is 521 different proteins because they overlap and are nested within each other. So let me show you what happens when a DNA insertion mutation occurs and you get a new gene inside there. The DNA gets cut and a copy, what you were talking about as duplication, gets inserted. This is what happens. And it breaks about 20 genes. So how is that good for the organism when you have genetic information being overlapping and nested, and you insert a block of DNA and you just broke a half a dozen genes? That's not going to be good.
Well, I mean, it depends on what the mutation does. I mean, and what type of environment the organism lives in. I mean, that just...
How is that so? How is it that breaking half a dozen genes?
If you live in the Arctic, a mutation that gives you shorter fur is not going to be beneficial. But if you live in, a desert or jungle, warm environment, a mutation that gives you shorter fur is an advantage.
Okay. How does that demonstrate evidence for evolution? Well, the organism already had hair. It's just getting longer hair. How does that move it towards becoming a fundamentally different type of organism because its hair is longer?
What's a type? What do you mean by when you say?
Well, that's what evolution claims, right? Completely different types of organisms.
What exactly is a kind? That's the thing.
Well, I don't know. I could ask you, what's a species? Evolutionary biologists
is a group of organisms that can reproduce viable fertile offspring.
Great, you just described kind.
So a kind is a species, then?
I would say.
Oh, okay. Well, then,
but it depends on what the evolutionists say.
We have witnessed speciation.
No, nobody's witnessed. It depends on what you call speciation.
Yes, we have witnessed. Yes, we can document. These organisms.
So, by your own definition of species, you just said that you described it in the same way that a biblical creationist describes kind. You said a type of organism which can reproduce fundamentally
offspring. So their offspring have to be able to have kids too.
A fundamentally new type of organism.
When you say a type of organism, what exactly do you mean?
I don't know. What do you mean by species?
I just told you a group.
We can play the same game back and forth with definitions of offspring. Okay, that's kind.
Oh, so that's okay. If the species is a kind, then we have witnessed. We have witnessed speciation.
We have witnessed creatures,
organisms that can no longer breed with their parent or cousin.
How does the inability to breed constitute evolutionary change?
Well, so we have populations of organisms that can no longer interbreed with their original ancestral stock or with their sister stock.
Yes.
I mean, that's speciation.
How does that show evolution?
Well, you just asked. If you define kind as a species, then we have witnessed
Well, I'm just playing the
Time
evolutionist
evolving.
game with words. That's all. I don't see how are you going to say that's evidence of evolution because an organism has fundamentally a change to its DNA so that it can't
Macroevolution
breed.
is defined
Let
as
me ask the question: so that it can't breed with the other members of that same population. How does that demonstrate evolution is true?
well, I mean, by definition, evolution. By definition, evolution is just change of allele frequencies in populations, and
How does
macroevolution.
changing allele frequencies in a population demonstrate evolution?
That's evolution by definition. I mean,
No,
I didn't define that. I mean, you can look it up at any biology.
I don't care what you define it as. That's not saying that it's a definition of something doesn't demonstrate that it's evolutionary change. For evolution to be true, evolutionary change must occur, right? How is the inability to breed with your sister population demonstrate evolution?
Because that's speciation. I mean,
You're not giving me an answer. You're saying just because it is. It's not.
well, I
evidence.
mean, so what do you define as? What do you think evolution is then?
Well, evolution is the philosophy that one type of living thing over successive generations by changing allele frequency, mutations causing change to DNA, which causes alleles to change their frequency in a population over time, which codes eventually get transformed by continuous mutation to code for fundamentally new different types of features so that a fundamentally different type of organism ultimately arises. Let me finish my statement, man. You asked me what's evolution. I'm trying to tell you what evolution is.
Well, I mean, you're saying, but it's important that we
no. Let me tell you what evolutionists love to avoid, which is the actual theory of evolution. Evolution posits that fundamentally different types of organisms arise by incremental changes to their anatomy. Right? The anatomy changes in little bits over a million times, and ultimately you get a fundamentally different type of organism, i.e. fish becoming land-dwelling creatures, birds coming from theropod dinosaurs. There's some different creatures, right?
Because
What's
of
the evidence that occurs?
The massive amount of time that those little changes that build up after all that time, then yes, they will. If you look at, A to Z, they're going to look very different from one another.
Well, that's your philosophy, but what's the evidence that process occurs?
There's evidence for it. We have evidence for it in the fossil.
What is that evidence?
Those are snapshots in time.
What is the evidence that occurs, that mutations do change the structural design and the anatomy of a living thing in increments to ultimately produce fundamentally new features of living things, like the eyeball in a horse, or the stinger in the tail of a scorpion, or the tooth in a monkey? What is the evidence that mutations do this?
That add these particular features?
That modify a feature in increments so that it becomes fundamentally new things arise.
One, and you can then make an edit to that copy.
That's your idea. I'm asking you for the evidence.
That's what happens. I mean, that's what
how do we know that happens? That's what I'm asking you. You're not telling me.
Oh, well, just biology, I guess.
How does biology do that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, just virtually every biologist. Just talk to a biologist at your university.
I say creationists say that God created everything in the beginning of 6,000, 6,500 years ago. Does that mean I've just provided evidence because they say so?
No.
Okay, great. Okay, so what's the evidence that mutations make evolution happen?
Ask biologists, how we know that gene duplication.
Well, how do you know evolution by mutation is true?
How do I know that it's true?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's given how there are many different, transitional fossils, and given how there's a nested hierarchy.
I don't know of any of those. Who knows of these transitional forms? What transitional form demonstrates that mutation?
Microraptor. Archaeopteryx, Homo erectus.
Archaeopteryx is admitted now by the world's foremost authorities on birds to be a fully formed bird.
No, it's not. No, it wasn't.
Yes.
It had a long bony tail. It had 3 fingers, and it had a reptilian mouth with no teeth. The idea that it was a full bird, not true.
Okay, Alan Fiducia is the world's greatest ornithologist. He's the world's most respected ornithologist. He says Archaeopteryx is a fully formed extinct bird.
Well, it didn't have a beak, and it had a long tail, which birds don't have. Clearly, it was extremely bird-like.
It was a different kind of bird, maybe, but all of its features are distinctly bird, except
but
that,
not like the birds we have today.
Birds have teeth today.
All the birds that we have today they don't have a tail. They have beaks with no teeth. And
there are birds with teeth.
No, there aren't.
Yeah,
no,
there are
not.
three
The
species
that you're
of bird.
Thinking of, that part of the beak has been modified to mimic teeth, but the actual teeth that Archaeopteryx had were more like that of a crocodile. So they were actual teeth, not just modified
birds. There are birds with teeth.
No, there aren't.
Archaeopteryx didn't have gums.
Archaeopteryx didn't have gums? I don't.
So what you're finding, on top of that, bird fossil footprints have been found in the earth, which are allegedly 20 million years older than what the evolutionists believe Archaeopteryx are. So how could this is one of the reasons that even your own camp says Archaeopteryx. Let me finish a statement, sir. Sir, let me finish a statement. Let me finish a statement.
Okay, sure.
So this is for this reason that evolutionist scientists admit that Archaeopteryx is not a transition to birds, because fully formed birds already existed 20 million years before Archaeopteryx.
Right. I understand that. So
it's not a transitional form to birds.
We're not saying that Archaeopteryx is directly ancestral to modern birds.
Okay, so it's not a transitional form to birds.
No, well, I mean, it's transitional in the sense that it does show a relationship between modern birds and traditional theropod dinosaurs.
How do you know that? It's a fossil in the earth. What about it demonstrates that how did Archaeopteryx demonstrate that birds come into being when fully formed birds, avian footprints, existed in the fossil record 20 million years older than Archaeopteryx? Fully formed birds already existed.
Birds could have come about before something like Archaeopteryx did. Okay. And again, we're not saying that Archaeopteryx is directly ancestral, but it does show a relationship.
I don't see that. I understand you do in your imagination. No,
it's not imagination. It's not my imagination that they have long tails and 3 fingers and a reptilian mouth with teeth. It's not imagination.
I see it's an unusual creature. Huh? I see it's an unusual creature. But if you're going to say
an unusual creature with
but if you're going to say but if you're going to claim that it evolved from something else, you've got to show a series of fossils that demonstrate it. You can't just point to a unique looking animal and say, see, that one's a transitional form. No, here's what you got to have. You got to have you got to have example A, B, C, D.
Okay. Yeah.
And then that animal. Let me finish. And let me finish. And then that animal, and then to be able to show that it evolved. Pointing to a unique looking creature in the rocks doesn't demonstrate evolution. It just demonstrates that's an unusual looking creature. To show that it evolved, you need a series of fossils that show it changing to become that creature. Without any series of fossils, even 3 or 5 or 6, you have nothing. You just have a creature.
Okay, so what about like Australopithecus, the Australopithecines, and then Homo habilis and Homo erectus?
I already demonstrated all of their features are distinctly ape.
No, they're not. No,
I just showed you about 7 science papers that state all of its features are distinctly ape.
For Australopithecus afarensis?
Yes, sir.
Can you do
I showed you that on the screen about 15 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago.
Or so, like regarding their femur and their
everything. They have a ridge, a brain case that's distinctly ape.
Right, but regarding their
distinctly ape jaws, they have a distinctly ape pelvis. They have a distinctly. They have an abducted great toe. They're chinless.
They're intermediate too.
Their foramen magnum is not centered. Their finger bones are curved. Everything about them is ape-like.
So everything including their femur and their pelvis and their foramen magnum, which I believe was intermediate. The foramen magnum was intermediate between modern.
That's all you got? That his foramen magnum was not dead center in the back of the skull and not dead center in the center? That's it?
Intermediate between us and modern apes.
All of the other features of the thing are distinctly ape. So I showed you they were on the screen with scientific papers that acknowledge these things.
Well, with the femur and the pelvis?
Yeah, they're all distinctly, all the bones of the creature are distinctly ape.
I'm skeptical about that. About the
Okay. I know you're skeptical of creation, but you can't tell me why we should believe that random genetic mutations design things, but you're skeptical of creation.
Well, I mean,
I've explained to you that DNA is information, linguistics, and algorithms that define all the features of every living thing, and you're still skeptical of creation. What's going on, David?
Well,
Why is it that you refuse to believe the scientific evidence?
Well, I mean, as far as I understand, all the scientific evidence points to, evolution. I mean,
It does? Evolution
I'm not
can
aware
produce
of any
information?
scientific evidence of creationism other
You're
than
not?
from organizations like the ICR and Answers in Genesis.
So you mean DNA is now known to be information organized linguistically and operates algorithmically, and you see no evidence for creation?
Well,
What?
I mean, not well. Let me rephrase this.
Yeah.
So I don't see any evidence that humans were created in our current form, unrelated to anything else. I think that, I think the evidence that we share common ancestors with other living things is overwhelming, and that we have not always existed in our present form. I think that that's overwhelming. Now, whether or not that was
overwhelming because you have
whether or not that was put into place by God, I don't know. Whether or not He designed a system like that, I don't know. But I think the evidence for for us not always being the same is overwhelming. Yeah.
Well, why did Stephen Jay Gould say that the prominent feature of the fossil record is stasis? Organisms appear, and then during their entire tenure on the Earth, they change in the tiniest ways, and that's it, and then they're gone.
Right. So what he's talking about is punctuated equilibrium. So, for example, at the end of the Cretaceous period, where we find this iridium layer, or where paleontologists find this iridium layer, which is an element very rare on Earth. Very common in asteroids, though, and then we also find large craters in the Yucatan.
That's not fossil evidence you're talking about.
Well, I'm getting there. So above this KT line, we do not find any dinosaurs, and above that, we begin finding mammals, and there's a large jump in evolution because the dinosaurs were gone. And so these positions were open for creatures like mammals to occupy. And they were able to diversify because there were no dinosaurs to compete with.
You know that dinosaur fossils are found on the surface of the Earth or right under the surface of the Earth constantly, aren't you? What do you mean we don't find dinosaurs above the KT boundary?
Okay,
They're found all the time. Go to Montana and you'll find dozens of dinosaur fossils above the KT.
Less than 65 million years old or something like that.
They're right coming out of there. Either found.
Well, are those fossils or are those layers? Are they dated to be less than 65 million years old?
Well, now we can talk about your imaginations about dating methods all you like.
No, it's not imagination.
I'm only pointing out the statement that we don't find dinosaurs above the KT boundary is false because dinosaurs in Utah and Montana and Nebraska are found. Let me finish the statement. Are found protruding from the Earth or within 10 feet of the surface of it.
Okay, well,
that's above the KT layer.
Have you ever found dinosaurs dated less than 65 million years old?
Well, we found soft tissue that proves they can't be 65 million years old.
No, it's just soft tissue can be preserved for that long under certain circumstances.
200 years.
I mean,
that's all iron can do.
Even Dr. Mary Schweitzer, even she says that stop using that that point.
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous for you to believe that 65 million years you're going to have soft tissue. That's
it had to be demineralized.
That's absurd.
Well, it had to be demineralized. I mean, you can talk to Dr. Mary Schweitzer about it.
No, I've studied all this. Collagen and proteins are still stretchy. The problem is biological molecules like proteins break down easily. Mm-hmm. They just fall apart over time.
They
stick around for 65 million years.
Why not talk to Dr. Mary Schweitzer about that?
I've seen everything she's got to say on it.
So why doesn't she agree with you?
Because she's wrong. Because she wants to keep her job.
So you think she's
wrong?
faking it or something like that just to keep her
she's
job?
she's just wrong. Why isn't any forensic scientist in the world agree that proteins are going to stick around 65 million years? But evolutionists are the one that tell us it does.
Well, under very rare circumstances, such as
Really?
what you're talking about, it's very unlikely, but apparently it can happen.
Rare? It's so rare that we found a dozen examples of it already.
Well, so okay, so let me. So
proteins
don't. It would not be possible to have
the side chains of amino acids. They don't naturally break down over time. These chemical bonds don't naturally just fall apart. They just stay on for 65 million years, right?
Right. Well, again, I'm not a paleontologist or a geologist, so I don't know exactly the mechanics of that. But if you talk to like paleontologists themselves, like Dr. Schweitzer, she can help. She can tell you about that.
I've seen everything she's got to say about it. What believing something and then being able to show that science is wrong when scientists who study the decay of a human body, for example, a forensic scientist who says that biological molecules are unstable in the environment after a person dies, and they just naturally break down. The bonds break, they fall apart. Even DNA is now believed to have a half-life of about 521 years. In other words,
what I've heard, DNA, the half-life of DNA is not constant like that of normal radioisotopes. It depends on temperature and environment and stuff like that.
Is it so? Okay, so in permafrost, you're going to get 8 million years. One paper published is the maximum you could get proteins preserved, 8 million years. In permafrost, that's like digging 30 feet down in North Dakota and burying it for 8 million years. But, the dinosaurs weren't subject to permafrost for 65 million years. I think it's bizarre that you believe that proteins are going to stick around and not naturally decay and all their amino acids just fall apart after 65 million years. That to me is an absolute bizarre thing to believe. But I'm not hearing any evidence for evolution. You haven't told me.
Well,
you haven't shown me any transitional forms.
It's either just a complete ape or a complete human or a complete dinosaur.
Sure, you haven't. How are you going to demonstrate? What? No, I told you about the bird.
Okay,
you have a unique bird. To show it evolved, you've got to have a series of fossils that show it came into being.
No, I don't have to show that. Again, I'm not claiming that Archaeopteryx is, an ancestor of modern birds. I'm just showing that it has a composite of.
Then you can't use it as evidence of evolution.
Features.
Then you can't use it as evidence of evolution for birds. If fully formed birds already existed 20 million years before.
With traditional theropod dinosaurs?
Does it?
Yes.
How?
I mean, yes, Archaeopteryx, yes, clearly very bird-like, but it also has a dinosaur.
It has a curved, hollow breastbone. It has bird feet. It doesn't have dinosaur feet. It has bird feet.
Well, okay, dinosaur teeth, I meant to say. Dinosaur mouth.
Okay, so it's an unusual bird. It's an unusual bird. Great. Now show me the series of fossils.
Dinosaur features.
Show me the series of fossils that demonstrate the Archaeopteryx came into being from a dinosaur.
Well, Archaeopteryx is a dinosaur. It's a dinosaur.
No, it's a bird.
Well, actually, it's a very, very bird-like dinosaur. It's a very, very bird-like dinosaur, technically.
Well, I mean, that's your ideas. All we know is it's a bird.
Features that Compsognathus did. In fact, Fred Hoyle himself said that he thought that Archaeopteryx was just a dinosaur like Compsognathus with feathers glued onto it.
Well, I mean, if that's your evidence for evolution, a unique-looking bird, I'd say you're falling short. You need to do better than that.
Give you one example. I mean, there's Archaeopteryx.
Okay, so what else is there?
There's
distinctly ape. Distinctly ape.
Homo erectus was distinctly ape. Are you saying that?
Oh, erectus. Okay, no, erectus falls well in line with the with the observed variation in human beings.
Okay. Well, how come some creationists will say that Java Man is just an ape, though?
Well, for the same reason, evolutionists. I don't know. I don't know of these evolution creationists myself.
Right. Like if you line up different skulls. Like Java Man, if they see Java Man, some will say that it's just an ape, and then others will say it's just a human. So
I don't hear that. I don't know where you're hearing that, but I don't hear that. So what we have is creatures that are distinctly ape, and for creatures that are extinct apes, and then we have creatures that appear to be well within the bounds of human variation, but don't have distinctly, but don't have a distinctly ape features. I'd say there's the gap there.
Well, who doesn't have distinctly ape features?
No.
Who doesn't have distinctly ape, or what didn't have distinctly ape features?
Homo erectus is not distinct.
Yes, it did. It had a large brow ridge and it had a smaller brain.
Human beings today have a brow ridge, and some of them have small brains.
Not like Homo erectus, no.
Not like. That's your evidence, not like?
Well, yes,
it's not nearly as large. No, human beings have brow ridges. Some human beings have very pronounced brow ridges, and human beings have different sized brains.
Right, yeah, we have larger brains than that.
Okay, so all of its features are distinctly human. They're not distinctly
Homo erectus was human, I would agree, but it also had ape-like features. It had a large brow ridge and
humans have brow ridges and small brains too. So, how's that distinctly ape?
Who has Who has a larger brow ridge and a smaller elk?
Look, do a search on Google for human brow ridge. You'll see lots of people with brow ridges.
Are you talking about the skeleton?
Living human beings. Modern
human beings with a brow ridge like Homo erectus? Is that what you're saying?
Take a look.
I'm skeptical. If you're talking about
I know you're skeptical of creation. I told you that DNA is information, linguistics, and algorithms, and you're still skeptical of creation.
Well, yeah, I mean, because the only places I'm hearing about these from are places like the ICR and Answers in Genesis.
Well, the only places I hear about evolution are for, Berkeley University and Neil Shubin and whatnot.
From the NIH, from all different types of
science. You have your sources, I have mine, but that's not winning an argument, son. You've got to show evidence for evolution. I'm not hearing it. I'm hearing you say, this creature has a brow ridge and a small brain. There's probably 900,000 human beings on the earth right now that have that.
Can you pull up a modern human skull that has a brow ridge like that of Homo erectus?
I don't do evolutionist homework for them, but you can do it when we get through the debate.
Find one. That would be cool. If you could find a modern human skull with a brow ridge like that of Homo erectus, that would be cool.
Okay, so let me screen share something with you.
With specifically just looking at the skull. Yeah. So.
Let me screen share something.
Okay, cool.
If somebody will put that forward for me, because I can't do it, they have to. I need some moderator to do it. There's a brow ridge.
No. I'm talking about looking at the skull.
That's a brow ridge, man.
Okay, but can you just look at the
bones of his head that make the brow ridge, not the muscles in his head.
Okay,
it's a brow ridge. Look at the flatness of his skull too at the top. Now, if you were to take all the flesh off of that man's skull, you'd say he was ape-like.
I'm skeptical of that, and
yeah, I know you're skeptical of everything.
Well, yeah, I mean, for good reason.
Well, why would you be skeptical of creation when it's now known that DNA is information? Can you explain why it's logical to believe that chemistry can produce information, algorithms, and linguistics? Because unless it can, evolution is not true.
That's how it happens.
How does choice making and procedures which require forward thinking about something that must be accomplished, and then designing a procedure with choices built into it to make that happen? How do molecules do that?
Well, DNA, they're chemicals. They don't have a mind.
Yeah. DNA is chemicals, and a compact disc doesn't have a mind either, but it can
be complicated chemical reactions, essentially.
Right, and a compact disc doesn't have a mind either, but it can be encoded with information also, just like DNA is a medium encoded with information. You haven't told me why it's plausible to believe that an algorithm, which is a procedure, a step-by-step procedure designed to achieve an end, which includes forward thinking and choice making, can be produced by molecules. Why
Was
should we
you
believe
talking
that
about
nonsense?
consciousness?
I'm
How
sorry?
we're conscious? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm asking you, why is it plausible to believe that undirected chemistry, molecules bumping around, can
What?
create a procedure designed to achieve a goal, which includes a step-by-step process that requires forward thinking? In other words, the goal is already set in the mind, and you design a series of processes of step-by-step procedure to achieve that, which includes choices like, if A is not appropriate, then select B, or if A is too big, then look for an alternative. How does chemistry do that? Those are mental processes, not chemical ones.
No, chemical reactions they don't happen like necessarily with a purpose, like with a mind, like
Exactly.
right.
So
I mean,
how does chemistry produce mental propities and then
oh,
record them on a medium?
so like since humans are made of chemicals, how do we have a mind?
No. How does chemistry produce mental processes?
Mental processes, like
Yeah, I
what
mean,
happens in
how
our
do
brain?
random, unguided chemical interactions at the molecular scale design a procedure to achieve a goal which requires forward thinking? In other words, you know what you need to achieve in advance, then you design a series of steps to achieve it. How can molecules do that? Why should we believe they can? Because science has discovered that DNA is algorithmic. It possesses numerous algorithms.
They just react. There's no mind.
I
There's no.
agree.
I mean,
I agree.
so why? I don't. I'm confused. Why are you asking? I mean, like
Because
that's
DNA
fine.
operates algorithmically.
It's
There's lots of algorithms in DNA. DNA repair mechanism is
right.
algorithmic. The operations of the ribosome is algorithmic. There's DNA information search, copy, paste, insert, delete processes are algorithmic. Information search processes.
Mhm.
These are algorithmic. Okay. Algorithms are step-by-step procedures designed to achieve a goal, which requires forward thinking and choice making. How do molecules decide about the future and make choices?
Molecules don't make choices. They don't have minds.
Then they can't make algorithms, can they?
No, that's not true. I mean,
It's not?
molecules do not have a mind, so of course they
Right.
don't.
Then how can they make an algorithm?
Well, so the algorithm is a result of the molecules, I suppose.
It is? How is that possible?
So I mean, our brains are made of neurons, and our neurons do not have a mind. So
I agree.
what's your? I'm confused. What are you asking about? Like, I mean, you accept that we can have like our minds can be a product of things that themselves are not minds. So what are you asking?
I'm asking you, how is it that DNA possesses algorithms if creation is not true? If a mind isn't involved in the design of the features and processes of the biology of all the living systems of the world, why do all the living systems of the world operate algorithmically?
What do you mean operate excuse me.
Okay, so
Algorithmically? Yeah.
Yeah, algorithms.
Yeah. So are you talking about like DNA coding for proteins and stuff like that?
No. I don't know why I should have to say it over and over again. It's really not as difficult as you seem to me making it out to be.
You're probably right. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm trying. I don't know what's wrong with you.
If somebody would screen share what I'm showing you on the screen,
Mm-hmm.
I want to show you something. That's an actual algorithm being processed in millions of cells in your body right this second.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real algorithm, and it's really what's happening.
That looks kind of like a computer code.
Kinda. Well, it is. That's.
Well, no.
It is exactly an algorithm. It has choice choices in it.
They are chemicals. They're not.
Well, it's performing these functions. These functions require mental processes. There's choices being made. Choices being made.
They're not
for the,
choices made by a mind.
yeah, there are. It's an algorithm. There are choices in
10
it.
minutes, guys.
By a
You
mind.
got 10 minutes.
Look,
It's
David, it's an actual algorithm. There are choices in it and forward thinking. The process is seeking to achieve a particular goal and describes different choices to be made to achieve it. That's mental processes. Decision making and forward thinking are something that require intelligence. Chemistry, why is it plausible to believe that undirected chemistry, mindless matter, is able to design an algorithm? Because if evolution is true, it must be true.
Yeah, it seems to. Are you saying that it seems to, like, it seems, since it's so, like, complicated and it's like a computer code, that it seems improbable that.
No, you keep
a mind designed this.
You move the goalpost on the thing on what I'm saying every single time you address it, and I understand why, because you can't address it. I understand why you're doing that. I'll say it as succinctly and simple as I can. An algorithm is a process of step-by-step procedure designed to achieve a desired goal.
Okay,
the goal is already first. The first thing that someone does when they design an algorithm is they define what it is they want to achieve. I want to do X, okay? And then they design a series of steps designed to achieve that goal. In that series of steps, there are decision making. There's decisions that have to be made. For example, if we come across something that meets the first requirement for what we're looking for, but doesn't meet the second, discard it and go looking for the other one. Let's compare A to B. If B is more like what we need than A, then discard B and let's choose A. Now, take A and go do X with A. This is what algorithms do. There are mental processes involved, forward thinking, a decision making process. Why are we to believe that mindless matter can do these mental things?
So somebody who wrote that code had a goal in mind, right?
Let me tell you what this is, what you see on the screen. This is actual processes that occur in every cell in your body. And what happened is a computer programmer wrote down those processes in computer language so we can understand it. And the result is an algorithm. Okay, so the algorithm is simply being described by the computer programmer. That's it. He's writing down exactly what happens in the cell chemically, and it's an algorithm, and includes forward thinking and decision making. But why are we to believe that mindless matter can do these things? Create algorithms, linguistics, and information.
So again, when cells multiply, DNA is copied. So what do you mean? So when things reproduce, DNA is copied, it's when during mitosis or meiosis or meiosis, these things just happen. They're not like.
What just happens? What happens?
Like gene duplications.
What things just happen?
Like mutations. They just happen.
Yeah, okay, we know mutations happen. So how is that evidence of evolution? Because mutations happen.
Well,
mutations destroy. They're a destroyer.
Guided by natural selection
mutations are destructive. They don't design anything anatomically.
Depends on the environment. If you have a mutation that codes for shorter fur or something like that, and you live
that's not mutation. That's phenotypic plasticity. It's not mutation.
Well, mutation.
That's just adaptation to the environment. That doesn't have anything to do with mutation. When a dog grows longer hair because you move him to Alaska from Mississippi, it doesn't. He didn't mutate. He didn't have a mutation that did it. His body simply naturally responded to the environment to create longer hair or thicker hairs. That's not mutation.
Well,
why are we to believe mutation is a mechanism for evolution?
Some of those will probably be excuse me, probably be born with longer fur than others in that litter, and some of those and those with longer hair have that longer hair because of the
How is that evolution, though?
okay,
Longer
well,
hair?
so
How is
I'm sorry?
having longer hair move that dog towards becoming a non-dog?
No,
How?
no. That's the thing, is that's another law of evolution. So like every ancestral clade that your ancestors belong to, you're going to belong to. So the descendants of dogs will always be dogs.
Right. So dogs are always dogs. So
Mhm.
why do you talk about this as though it's evidence of evolution?
Well, I see what you mean. But dogs did come from non-dogs that
They
were not
did?
quite dogs yet.
How do
So
we know that?
because of we don't find any dog fossils further back in time. In fact, we find very
So how does that mean they evolved from something, because we don't have fossil evidence for their evolution?
well. So we can compare their genes with other animals like bears and wolves, or excuse me, bears and seals, and
Okay, so how does genetic similarity demonstrate that they're related to something else? I've already explained to you that a difference of 1 to 3 amino acids in a protein, by change by mutation, caused that protein to become either reduced in functionality or completely dysfunctional. So that contradicts your evolution idea. Where's the evidence that mutation creates new novel functional proteins?
new novel functional so if you have a gene duplication and
How is a duplication caused?
added to that duplicated gene,
How does a duplicated gene constitute genetic information that codes for something novel in an organism?
novel in an organism, what do you mean?
Look, we all understand the story. Genes get duplicated, then acted upon by subsequent mutations to become new information that codes for new features in living things.
Right.
That's the story. What's the evidence for it, though? There isn't a shred of evidence for that. There's no scientific reason to believe that story.
Well, again, I'm not a biologist, but you can talk to biologists.
Why are you debating evolution about with science? And why are you coming to me with your philosophy about things you tell me your faith in what you believe if you can't tell me the science behind what makes it believable? I don't care what you believe. I care about the scientific evidence. You haven't given us one reason to believe that mutation is a mechanism that designs anything.
So when you say a novel innovation, I'm still confused. What do you mean by that?
You know what evolution theory claims about that, right? Don't you?
Well, it claims
novel proteins, for example.
Ancestor, right?
Yeah, that's the claim, right? Now, what's the evidence for it?
DNA.
How is something a package?
In humans and elephants and crocodiles and all types of organisms.
How is a 4-dimensional package of information that has phonetics, semantics, punctuation, syntax, grammar, semiotics, aprobatics, and operates algorithmically evidence of evolution instead of design?
Do you paternity test?
What's that?
Huh?
I'm sorry?
Do you accept a paternity test?
Well, genetic similarity between human beings.
Right.
So what is it? How is genetic similarity?
Genetic similarities between human beings.
How does genetic similarity between humans and some other organism demonstrate evolution? Because there are all kinds of incongruencies. In my opening statement, I read 3 statements from prominent evolutionists who said the incongruencies in the phylogenetics idea have become increasing. The more we learn about genetics, the more problems it creates for evolution theory. But you don't remember me telling you that, showing you that? Like people like Linda Walkup and other evolutionists who say the more we discover about evolution, the more problems, I'm paraphrasing what they said, the more problems we find with our idea of phylogenetics being evidence of evolution, because we keep finding incongruencies. In other words, this doesn't line up with that. I'll give you an example. Let me give you an example, okay? There are lots of features in various creatures that allegedly are coded for, here's a beautiful one, okay? Evolution allegedly creates frogs, right, and lizards, right? Now, the homeobox genes that create the front limbs in birds is not the same series of homeobox genes in reptiles that makes the front legs of reptiles. Now, if evolution were true, evolution would have preserved those homeobox genes and modified them with mutations. Let me finish so you'll understand. Okay. You're not going to understand if you keep talking.
Okay, you're right.
So evolution allegedly created the front limbs of reptiles, right? And there are sets of genes called homeobox genes that define their development, right? Okay. So now evolution says that birds evolved from reptiles. Okay. So if that were true, then evolution should have taken these homeobox genes in reptiles and modified them over and over and over so that the legs of reptiles transform into wings for birds, right? The problem is this: the genes in reptiles that produce the front legs of reptiles is not the same set of genes that produces the wings in birds. So that doesn't match the evolution idea. Evolution been true, evolution would have modified the same set of genes over and over and over and over until they produce the wings of a bird instead of a leg in reptile. That's not what happens. So the problem for evolution is not only that, but evolution would have to start completely from scratch and design entirely new sets of homeobox genes just to make the wings of birds instead of reptile legs.
Okay,
see,
so
that's a marvelous example of an outrageous incongruency in your idea of phylogenetics. You see, it doesn't work for evolution theory. It breaks the theory.
Okay, so when you say reptile, do you mean like just crocodiles, lizards, snakes? Or like,
well, those are reptiles, right?
Right. But okay, so do you accept that dinosaurs are reptiles?
I think that's questionable.
You do?
Some may have been, and some may not have been. There's
so
questionable.
When you say reptile, you mean something that's ectothermic, or
it's possible some were.
Some dinosaurs were most likely warm-blooded.
Because a gigantic dinosaur that is a cold-blooded would have a very hard time surviving. But the point you see I'm pointing out is the incongruencies that they discover genetically that mess with the evolution theory, that screw up the theory of evolution, like the fact that the homeobox genes that make the front legs in reptiles is not the same homeobox genes that make the wings in birds. If evolution had been true, evolution would have modified the same genes in the reptiles that make legs to transform them, the legs, slowly into wings for birds. But that can't be what happened, because the genes that make the legs in reptiles is not the same series of genes that make the wings of birds. So you see, that's the kind of thing. When it comes to the phylogenetics, I'm trying to tell you there are massive and numerous incongruencies that mess up the evolution theory you're probably not even aware of.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with this gene that you're talking about. So I'm gonna have to look that up. See what.
It's not just one gene; it's a whole series of homeobox genes.
Okay, right. I'm gonna have to look those up and see if what.
And there are lots more incongruencies, things that don't add up. For example, a mouse is genetically closer to a more like a let's see if I can remember this correctly. I think a mouse and a cow are more genetically like each other than either one of them is to a human being. But it should be that the mouse is more closely related to a human being than a cow. But the cow and the mouse are more genetically similar to each other than either one of them is to a human being. There's lots of stuff just like that. The evolutionists just don't talk about.
Than chimpanzees are to gorillas. So they're closer to us than they are, or chimps are closer to us than they are to gorillas.
But genetic similarity is based largely on protein codes. And when they compare the human genome to the chimpanzee genome, and they find massive chunks of DNA that are identical or nearly identical, close to each other, you know what they often do? They just discard them because they don't line up. They're in different locations. A big block of DNA they find in the chimpanzee genome nearly identical to this big block in the DNA of a human being. But guess what? It's in the wrong location. It's way over there. It's supposed to be right here, just like where the chimps is. So what do the evolutionists do? Well, throw that one out. And then throw out the other one too, and the other one too. And let's just whittle it down until we find what genetic similarities we like. That's how they deal with it. And when it comes to protein similarity, similarity is not good enough. Proteins are so specific that a difference in, if you get a mutation, let me put it like this, you get a mutation that changes a single amino acid in a protein in your body, that protein now has diminished functionality or it's completely useless. That's how mutations mess with proteins. So the idea that a genetic similarity in the proteins between a human and a chimpanzee is evidence of evolution is ridiculous because proteins are too specific. It's like saying if I modify a cog if I have a very, very similar cog in one machine and it's a very similar cog in this machine, and I take the cog out of one machine and put it in the other and it doesn't work because similar ain't good enough when it comes to something that's so specific, highly specific, like a protein. Similar is not good enough.
Okay,
it has to be the same.
This is so where exactly do you draw the line? So like you said that you accept like paternity tests to determine relationships between human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you draw the line between like
well, I just gave you one reason. Here's another one. DNA of chimpanzees is 8 to 10% longer than a human being's. Where did it get 8 to 10% more DNA?
Right, and there are some, and to quote you on well, not quote you, but there are also some onions, and some onions have 4.5 times have a genome that's 4.5 times larger than.
Yeah, that's not concordant with the evolution theory. The evolution theory should posit that the more complex an organism is, the more information it needs, so it should have a bigger DNA. No, theoretically, it contradicts the theory of evolution.
No, sir, that's not necessarily.
Yeah, it contradicts the theory of evolution.
I haven't heard that before.
Oh, it contradicts the theory of evolution in a big way. There's lots of examples. Like the amoeba, the amoeba has massively more genetic information than a human being's DNA, and lots of other creatures too, right? And that's discordant with the evolution theory, which is that your idea that duplicate mutations occur, that gets transformed into new information and makes something fundamentally different. Over time, it's an onward, upward sort of an evolutionary process with development of genetic information. So finding creatures that have more DNA than human beings or more DNA than any other is discordant with the evolution theory. According to evolution theory, an onion should not have more DNA than a human being.
Why would that be apparent?
Because an onion is a remarkably simple organism compared to a human being.
Well, I mean, just having more DNA does not mean that you're more complicated.
That's not. The more complex a system is, the more information is necessary. Like you need a lot more information on how to build a space shuttle than a lawnmower. Mm-hmm. See, right. So the onion is remarkably simple compared to a human being. It should not require so much information. This doesn't concord with the evolution theory. It contradicts it. And there's many, many examples. That's a phylogenetics inconsistency.
So like an onion being complex.
It's remarkably complex.
So
it's also remarkably simple compared to a human being.
4.5 times more than other onions.
Onions don't have a pancreas, a bladder, a heart, a liver, a kidney.
Larger genomes, are those more advanced?
No, see, that doesn't match the evolution theory, though. That's the thing.
No, it does. I mean, you would accept. I think you would accept that those onions are in the same created kind.
Let me ask you a simple question. Isn't it true that you're going to need massively more information to build a space shuttle than a lawnmower? Yes, that's true. Yeah. Right. And why is that? That's because the space shuttle is massively more complex than a lawnmower, right?
Yeah.
A human being is vastly more complex than an onion. And so it should require vastly less information. But that's not what we find out.
Again, I'm not a geneticist, so I don't know if that's.
So you see, I'm just trying to walk you through the rationale, the logic of it, so to kind of force you.
Yeah, I've never heard that. I've never heard that. I've never heard anybody say that. Well, except for a few creationists. I've never heard anybody say that. Evolution would expect.
What is the block duplication and gene duplication theory posit? That's the very thing. So you see, it doesn't match the evolution story, because the more complex a thing is, the more information it requires.
No.
Wait, you just admitted the space shuttle requires vastly more information than a lawnmower.
Well,
again, you're going to make an exception for biological things because you're an evolutionist, right?
Well, sure. Yeah.
Oh, okay. See, thanks for admitting it.
Well, yeah. I mean, we knew I was an evolutionist before the entire time, right? Well, we knew I was an evolutionist the whole time, right?
Right. So, I mean, you're willing to believe things that don't seem rational unless
I think it's rational.
Unless it deals with evolution, then it becomes suddenly rational.
Evolution. Just go to local university.
I've studied everything I need to know about evolution, lots of it. And I know this, that creatures which are simpler than the more complex ones should require vastly less information. And that's not what we see. That's a tremendous incongruency with the evolution theory.
Yeah, I've never heard anybody expecting that, You
didn't think about it.
Right. Well, again, I'm not a geneticist.
Okay,
I'm going to reach out to some of them, and I'm going to ask them about this, and I'll see what I'm going to ask several of them.
Well, good. I hope you do that. And, you'll get all kinds of philosophical ideas, but you won't get anything that solves that issue. Mm-hmm. The simplicity of it is beautiful. The less complex a thing is, the less information it requires.
Yeah, if there might be
just the remarkable simplicity of it.
Watching this too, if there are, then feel free to
Oh, I've debated geneticists. I've debated geneticists. I have to treat them the same way I do a layperson. I have to force them to admit that there's an incongruency and then watch them deny it right after they admit it.
Well, who are some of the geneticists that you debated?
Well, I debated Dr. Dan Larhammer of the University of Uppsala, Sweden, and I debated in a casual debate a lady called Fiona Robertson a couple of times. Mm-hmm. I asked her one question for 45 minutes. She was unwilling to answer it. Just one question.
What question was that?
The question?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what it was. Oh, what is the evidence that random mutation builds structural change in organisms incrementally?
Structural change in organisms.
No. It was she kept citing flies born with dual wings or human beings born with an extra finger as an example of evolution. And I asked her,
mutation.
Why is it logical to believe that a duplication of an existing feature constitutes a new feature in the anatomy of the animal? And she wouldn't answer my question for 45 minutes.
So a new feature. So if an animal doesn't have a tail, and then...
No, the example was, I asked her, what's the evidence that mutations build features in living systems and create new features so that you can get a fundamentally different type of organism arrive incrementally over time? And she pointed to human beings which can be born with 6 fingers. And I said, but a 6th finger is a duplicate of an existing feature. That's not a new feature. That's a duplication of an existing one. Evolution requires new features to arise, not just duplicating existing ones.
Well, yeah.
And she wouldn't answer my question.
And then you edit that duplicate, then you're going to get.
Well, that's your philosophy. What's the evidence that mutations can do that?
What's the evidence that mutations can
modify genetic information to create fundamentally new features?
So, are you asking me what evidence is there that
What's the reason for believing that mutations transform genetic information so fundamentally new features arise that didn't exist?
Can you give me an example of a fundamentally
eyeballs, bladders, or fingernails, toes, ears, ossicles in the ear, a heart, a lung, a pancreas, a liver, a kidney, a lung, anything.
Okay.
A stinger in the tail of a scorpion.
Okay. Did you know that camels and llamas, you can, they've artificially inseminated, I believe, I don't remember which one it was, but they were able to cross a camel and a llama through artificial insemination.
How does that demonstrate evolution?
Well, the thing is that the camel has a hump, which the llama does not have. So that's new information.
That's morphological, not anatomical.
Well, morphological, not anatomical.
Yeah, shape and structure. It's not structural design. Anatomy is structural design of a feature, features that exist in the body plan of an animal that don't exist in another. That's anatomical differences. The hump in the back of the camel is a morphological difference between a llama and a camel, not an anatomical one.
Okay.
And then there's phenotypic plasticity. Organisms can express a feature, lose the feature, and express that same feature again later if they need it. That doesn't demonstrate evolution either.
So, I mean, like, again, so you're looking for...
I've asked you a lot of questions. You weren't able to answer any of them. Such as, why are we to believe random mutations?
The ones that I didn't answer, I will address in so what are the ones that I didn't address?
Why are we to believe that random mutations build genetic information to create fundamentally new structural design?
Random mutations occur. They're selected for by natural selection. That's just a fact.
Yeah, we know they happen. Right. Now, what's the evidence that random mutations build the information that define fundamentally new features?
A fundamentally new feature.
Right. So evolution is true, because animals got eyeballs when they didn't have eyeballs. Scorpions got a stinger in their tail. Scorpions got a stinger in their tail when they didn't have one. Some creature, the antecedent, didn't have a stinger. It evolved. See, every feature, why do evolutionists play dumb about what do you mean by? What is that?
Well, it's
That's
kind of
all
vague.
you guys ever do when we debate. What do you mean by a feature? What do you mean by information? What do you mean by?
Because it is kind of vague. I mean, if what you mean is
you pretend to be so blasted stupid when debating a creationist to avoid answering a question, but then when you guys get together in a little group, all you want to do is talk about how much you know.
Okay, I'm trying to explain why it can be confusing, all right? Okay? So, if what you mean by information is just the size of your genome, then, having a duplicated gene added to your genome, that increases its size. So, that's information. And
that's a negative. That's not new information. That's not new information.
If there is a point mutation at that duplicated gene, then
that's philosophy,
and it's added. So
mutations can happen to a gene can be duplicated, which is rare, very rare, way too rare to support evolution. Okay, it's not. Yeah, and secondly, I showed you an example of a duplicate mutation, a duplicate a chunk of information being inserted into the DNA. And what's that going to do? That breaks the genes, especially overlapping and nested genes at that site. Those genes get damaged. That's a reduction of information. And the duplicate existing information is not new information. It's a copy of the same thing. Just like if I pulled a page, I got a notebook right here. I got a notebook. See, listen, I got a notebook right here. If I tear a page out of this notebook that has writing on it and insert it in a different, and copy it, and then insert it back into the notebook, did I create new information? No, I didn't add any information. I just duplicated what's already there. No new information.
If you duplicate that and
that's not new information.
Edit that duplicate, then that's new.
What's the evidence that random mutations edit duplicate genes to constitute new information that design fundamentally new features in organisms? What's the reason for believing that?
It depends on what type of fundamental feature you're talking about.
This is the same question I've been asking you for an hour. You see, I asked Fiona Robertson, What is the evidence that a duplicated gene that creates an additional finger in the hand of a human being, how does that demonstrate evolution of a new feature arising? And here I've been asking you for an hour, what's the reason for believing that duplicate information being pasted into the DNA is acted upon by subsequent mutations to create new features? And you can't answer that. See, I understand your philosophy, what you believe. I believe that mutations are going to transform that block of information that was inserted in there and broke those genes and damaged that organism. Is going to be transformed by new mutations and to become information that makes claws. I can see it in my mind. I know you believe that.
What was there before the claws, though?
But what's the scientific reason for believing it?
I mean, are you modifying an arm or a hand or something and then modifying it into a claw?
I have to define every word that comes out of my mouth for you to understand the simple concept?
Well,
see, this is the funny thing. When evolutionists are asked a question by a creationist, the evolutionist has to ask 30 questions about the question instead of answering the question.
Mm-hmm.
That's remarkably telling. If you don't have an answer, that's it. You believe it. But you don't have any scientific reason for believing it, but you believe it. You have your faith. You believe the storyline.
I was just going to jump in real quick, guys. I just wanted to point out that this has been an extremely good discussion. We've had a really good audience tonight. Everybody's enjoying. You guys have kept it respectful and most importantly, extremely engaging. We've touched on a number of topics. We've been at this for about 2 hours now.
Yeah, actually. I guess it's time to shut this down. David, I've enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah,
I hope I've made you think.
Really talking
it's been fun, you know. And I appreciate the way you're respectful instead of insulting like son.
Right.
Thanks for being a good-natured guy.
Awesome. If you guys wanted to, you know what? That being said, if you guys wanted to just take a minute and kind of wrap things up and give your thoughts as to how the discussion went, what I did was instead of doing a Q&A because the discussion was going so well, I just took the 20 minutes and added it to the discussion. So it probably flew by for you guys. You didn't even notice.
That's fine.
It's been a great debate. So I'll give you guys the floor just to say some final words and we'll call it a night.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. I really enjoyed talking with Neph tonight. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, because I think he's right. I'm going to look for a specific example or provide him with specific examples of what he would consider like a new novel feature created by mutations. I'll do my research and I will send him an email and give him some examples, and I might even make a video about it.
Well, David, remember that when I was talking about anatomy, because evolution posits that anatomy changes over time to produce the various types of living things, okay? Not just talking about something biological. There has to be anatomical evidence for evolution. So your answer, I hope that you'll look for evidence that supports the idea that it causes anatomical change, okay? Just point that out.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't have anything to say. I think I've made all the case I want to. I've enjoyed the debate. I'm good leaving it like it is.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you both for, it's always easy as a moderator when you guys can just handle it yourselves and keep it respectful. So thanks for the audience, our faithful listeners for joining us tonight. I do want to thank Praise and George Bond for their super chats. So awesome. Thank you for the support. So Praise said, I appreciate Team SFT for all they do. You guys are in evolutionary philosophy. Thanks, Praise. And George Bond, he says, I want to see my mate Bill Morgan debating. So, hey, maybe in the future, David, since you're so open to dialogue, we can set you up with Bill Morgan, and we'll go from there. So thanks again, guys. Tomorrow we've got Salvador and Ron debating genetic entropy. That's at 9 or 9:30 EST. We will set an event so you guys can make sure you check it off on your calendar. So anyways, I'll hand it over to Praise. Praise, thanks so much, brother. You've done a great job as usual. You're an incredible blessing. So I'll leave it to you to shut it down.
My pleasure, SFT, and appreciate all the participants tonight. Great discussion. A lot of data information out there. Good stuff. Also want to thank the chat for all they do and all their comments and getting involved and contributing to Team SFT. And we're going to say good night and God.